Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to pick the brain of an entertainment mastermind. So please join me in welcoming Scott Keeney, aka DJ Skee. Skee, from being one of the first to showcase some of today's most popular artists like Kendrick Lamar and Lady Gaga to partnerships with Nike and Google, the NBA, the NFL, and really so much more, it feels like you've done so much in your career already, and still you have so much more to accomplish. So I'd love to start off today with hearing a little bit about yourself and how you've built your career.
Absolutely. Well, first off, I'm so excited to be here at the Reconvene Summit. It's so awesome working with you, Alex, and the entire Eventbrite team. This whole program has been amazing. And to all the people that I've had the pleasure of talking to, I've learned so much from it. So I'm excited to be here. My story is a little bit crazy, right? Like everybody else's. I grew up in Minneapolis, and when I was 16, knew that I was going to be like a DJ, just like fell in love with it. And ended up, I was always entrepreneurial, so I didn't work a real job. I was like selling PS2s and Xboxes at the time and flipping them. And through that, I ended up getting connected to the CEO of Loud Records, Steve Rifkin, who needed a PS2 for his son, ironically, and just stayed in touch with him, built a rapport, and a couple months later decided to just send him a bunch of ideas. You know, for me, the biggest thing that I could have got back from him was like a Wu-Tang Clan shirt or being able to like join a street team out there. But he offered, he's like, hey, come fly out and meet with me. So I ditched high school, flew out, met with him, and he offered me a job. So I had this kind of opportunity that I wasn't expected for and wasn't really ready. I decided to take a leap of faith, a calculated leap, right? And move to Los Angeles, somewhere I'd never been, drive a U-Haul across the country, graduate high school early. And I was fortunate because although I was a DJ, I was able to learn the industry side of the business first, which I think was key for my career because he also pioneered a lot of street and guerrilla marketing tactics. And so I was able to learn what it was like to interact with all these different clients. I ended up landing my first client that I got known for was T-Mobile with the Sidekick back in the day. And we had just an incredible campaign. And then from that, I started working with all these different brands from Nike to Adidas to Google and you name it, right? Along that way, my DJ career took off a little later when I started producing specifically like 300 bars for Game, and then became like the West Coast mixtape DJ with Snoop and Kendrick, and then radio and TV. But I was fortunate enough to learn the industry side first. Then my DJ career took off later. And then I was able to mix kind of both of those worlds together, which is, I think, what's brought me to this interesting kind of career, right? Where I have my public facing side where I'm DJing, performing, hosting TV shows, then the entrepreneurial side where I've launched venture-backed businesses, worked with some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies in the world. And I think I have a really unique perspective sitting kind of at the intersection of like talent, but also like on the business side of things. And I think, one of the skill sets I've had is being able to have the foresight to see like trends and see what's meaningful to audiences early on and be able to go execute against them.
That's awesome. And it all started with that risk that has reaped some incredible rewards. So, kudos to you. And I think what I want to focus on today is how well you've been able to partner with those household brands that you've mentioned in really some incredibly unique ways, because the event creators out there are searching for similar opportunities in hopes of expanding their reach and tapping into new and into larger audiences. So I think a good place for us to start to set a baseline is to really understand what people should be looking for in a collaborative partnership. So what would you say should be the goal of working with other brands?
Yeah, the goal of working with other brands is to enhance and give you the tools and flexibility to do more. And that could come from a couple things. One could be financial, just the resources and support to pull off these events. The other could be from cross-marketing and cross-promotional, the ability to amplify what you're doing. Another is just like legitimacy, right? Like tying in with other brands and other kind of creators can add a whole level of like legitimacy with what you do. The way that I always say, like in getting these things started though, is it really has to start with you, and you have to offer value to them first and foremost, right? Like when I met Steve, the value that I offered him was he needed a PlayStation for his son's Christmas gift. He would do whatever it took to get that. And from that, like I just built that relationship. And so if, a million people hit him every single day, and it's the same thing with brands. These brands get inundated with requests. They're looking, and everybody that's working there, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the marketing directors, of the event directors, of the people that you're pitching. They're looking to like get wins on the board because they want to enhance and further their career and get promoted. So they need to get wins. So I think you have to think on like, all right, what can I offer them that will make them win, right? The brand as well as the individual, because you're speaking on a one-to-one basis with, a leadership director or a marketing director at these brands that is going to be the one that ultimately signs off on working with you. How do you make them look good? How do you make their brand look good? Not just so it can't just be about you. Like that's the obvious. Like, of course, we all want support and that can come in the multitude of ways that we talked about, but how do you support them? That's, I think, where you really start, and where a lot of people ignore. They're just thinking like, hey, I have this event, pay me money. And they don't think, I'm like, all right, if I'm the marketing director and I have a limited budget, I have 1 million people hitting me up for things, why should I choose this person, this brand? Why does it make sense? And also like being realistic, like it's not good. Like Rome wasn't built overnight. A lot of things are staying along that journey of staying, persistent with it and reaching out. Like you're probably not going to get the biggest brand day one, like, and nor should you, right? Like you're probably not ready. You have to go through a lot more before you're there, but there's so many other things. Like go where other people aren't and figure out like your really unique skill set and also be persistent with it. When I landed my first marketing client, I talked about with T-Mobile and the Sidekick back in the day, which probably predates many of you, but for those of you around know the impact that it had. I landed them. That was probably my 100th like cold. I wasn't even sending emails at the time. I was sending like overnight packages with gift packages because I was like looking up people's address to like send them a care package to get their attention versus just an email that everybody else does. And that was probably like the 100th package I sent out, and it finally hit, right? And that was all I needed. That set me up and created so many other things. But a lot of people would have given up a lot earlier on.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're focusing on the individual, not just the overall brand, but really connecting with someone on a one-on-one level to understand what their goals are and how you can help them further their career as much as you want them to help further your career. So, we've established what that partnership should be. It provides you tools, financial, cross-promotional, it gives you legitimacy, but you really have to find a way to offer value to them as much as you're trying to get value out. So 100%. Now I want to talk about how to secure partnerships. We understand like what we're looking for, what the goal should be, but how do you go about like getting them? You mentioned some really cool tactics just now, but I want to be real for a second. Now you probably get so many brands reaching out to you for partnerships. That's admittedly what Eventbrite did, but most people probably don't have that kind of reputation yet. So thinking back to earlier in your career, while keeping in mind the experience that you have now, what do event creators need to do to find, to attract, and secure those partnerships with other brands?
Yeah. So, after you go through those steps that we just talked about, right? Like, which is, you have to have a cool event, right? Like, and you have to have it out there and have proven it. Like, go and invest. If you're not going to invest in yourself and go out and do like some of these first ones to prove it, then why should somebody else? Like, that's kind of the thing until you have that history. But then once you go out, like, you have to get creative. You have to stand out. We talked about like figuring out what is going to be valuable to that brand and that individual, but also go down to like the individual. Like the toughest thing then is standing out and getting attention. Once you get the good news is like once you get in these ecosystems, people like doing business with people that they know generally, right? Like if you have a toothache, you go to a dentist, or somebody recommends. But the toughest thing is like, how do you introduce yourself to the market? And so for like me, even like going back, it's funny because with T-Mobile, the first, that was 20 years ago that I was working on the Sidekick stuff. I still work with the person that was the marketing director that I sent that letter today. And we've worked on, because they've gone to multiple companies and as have I, and we've worked on multiple projects, but we've had that relationship and she trusts me. So when there's a new project they want to launch, they'll come to me because they know we're going to execute. So the challenge is you just need, once you get in, it becomes a lot easier. And once you build that rapport, so you kind of have to do whatever it takes to come in. You have to have everything buttoned up, like from making sure like it's little things that I even look at when people are applying for things, like your email address. Does it look professional? Is it an official like at your domain, or are you using like a free email domain? Like it might not make a big difference, but for me, like I focus on every little detail, making sure like your pitch decks look really good, even if it's like, and you can buy templates or you can even find free templates for those decks to fill in, but make sure the aesthetic looks right. Like make sure that you're presenting yourself in the way that like, especially a brand, they're very like generally conscious of how they look and how they appear. So you need to kind of have those same things. And then the key thing is like how you build and connect with them. And networking is a great way, of course, going in through referrals, going in through friends and people, but that's not always realistic, especially when you're getting started. So you have to track down who the right person that you should talk to, meaning that if you're targeting say it's a local brand or a national brand, who is the person to even like cut the check? You might know the chief operating officer or the CFO. That's awesome, but you need to talk to the marketing department because and they might be able to connect you if they know them. But make sure you're targeting the right person. And then when you do, you have to get their attention because they're likely being courted by many others. It's like dating, right? Like if you're dropping a DM to somebody, right, or trying to hook up with them, there's probably a lot of other people doing it too. So like, how do you stand out? Like, what's that unique thing? And you kind of like, you've done these things, like you go in and you do research on what that person likes and what they're into. So it's no different. Like for me, when I'm like reaching out or just connecting with somebody, I look at backgrounds, like, and see how you can leverage things. Where are they from? You might find somebody that's from the same place as me. Like anytime I see somebody like grow up in Minnesota and do still a lot of work with like my local teams there, or see people that are into music, that's an easy conversation piece where I can leverage. So like find where those similarities are and how you can do that. And, I'm fortunate, like, hey, do you want to come to a Vikings game or something? There's things that you can do, but like figure out how you can stand out amongst the pack, just like anything else. And just making sure that everything is super buttoned up and super tight.
Yeah. Pay attention to those little details and nurture those relationships and make your interactions and your relationships more personal rather than transactional, and really understanding like who somebody is, what they care about is the way to do that. I love that.
And like, yeah, I'm not a fan of like just the generic copy and paste cold email either, right? Like it's like, hey, like you want something, and people know when they get those instantly. I got one the other day that they forgot to even, they said, hey, insert name here. They forgot to even like take that part out, like instant delete, right? Like as soon as you do those things, like nobody's going to pay attention to that. Like get their attention in the subject, get their attention, like, and don't write it too long. Like people are going to just glance at it. You just need to get their quick attention. What's your elevator pitch?
Right. There's that cliche of you need to knock on 100 doors for one of them to open. And you mentioned that with looking for your partnership with T-Mobile, and you're sending out, a ton of different packages, but there's a nuance and a right way to do that. You can't send the same message to 100 different people. You have to be tailoring that message to the person who you're speaking to so that they'll pay more attention to it. It'll be more relevant for them.
You nailed it, Alex. And also too, it's like figuring out, all right, once you get a little reaction, then you have to go all in on it. And whether it works or doesn't work, it's going to be a great case study, because you can find out, like, if you don't end up landing that sponsor or that partner or whatever it is, like you can look back and see what worked and what doesn't, and change your tactics for the next time. But once you kind of get a little of a reaction, then it's time to like focus all your energy. And for all that work that you did in research on that person, now you double down and like become like top of mind and like find a way to make it happen and hear them out. Like listen to them, see what they want, find out what, like, hey, here's what the event that I'm doing. Like, are you guys, they might not even be doing things at that moment. Like, so take as much intel and ask, try to learn and discover as much as you can instead of you just talking about what it is. Try to get as many, the more insights that you can get earlier, meaning that they could say, hey, we have this much budget for this year. Or they might say, hey, we don't have any budget until there's things might be planned out. Then you're not going to pitch them on anything this year. They're not going to change their budget just for you, right? So like, all right, well, your pitch is going to change towards next year's event or things like that. But the earlier you can get more information from those partners too, then you use that right away and as part of that pitch.
Yeah, nurture those relationships. Don't expect, you said it earlier, don't expect things to happen immediately, but stay consistent as well. I love that. All right, so we covered the purpose of a relationship, but the purpose of a partnership, how to find and land a collaboration. And I think next up is, how do you make it successful? And for a moment, I want to shout out your work with the Minnesota Vikings. You mentioned them. You are the resident DJ for their home games. And since you've been working with them, the team has been awarded multiple NFL Best Game Day Entertainment honors, which is incredible. And along those same lines, you founded Skee Sports, where you design experiences that maximize revenue and fan engagement. So clearly, you know how to create an unforgettable live event. And I want you to take us inside that process. Once you secured a partnership,
yes,
what are the keys to a successful collaboration, and how do you incorporate them into an impactful live experience?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, it was something that was so natural and I was so passionate about. So like when you're really passionate about into something, and that's my belief, like, look, we unfortunately can't always work with partners and brands and do work that we love 100% of the time. But I believe that like life is too short to focus on things that you don't like, and to really go after the things that you love and the brands that you love. The Vikings kind of came to me, and they, when they opened the new stadium, they wanted me to just DJ the opening night, which was a Sunday night game against our rivals, the Packers. And I was like, all right, well, I want to do a lot more with them. I'm going to go all out and go above and beyond. So I got like, I was like, I'm going to turn it to a festival style atmosphere. And at the time, DJs weren't really a thing in the NFL or most pro sports at that point. And so like, we got the crowd there early. I got my socials activated, got people like turned up, and got to the point where I wanted them to come back to me. So I wasn't pitching them, and it happened. They're like, that was incredible. Any game you want to come back to, like we'd love to have you. And so I ended up doing a deal, and I haven't left since. And in that time, like I've kept doing more and more and like helping them on the content side. We're going to launch some really cool programs in the near future in the entertainment side. And it's just been about like learning and building with them, right? And again, it's each year we add on a little more and do a little more here and there, but they're a massive organization that's run by another, that's under the NFL's guidance, which is like, a whole other thing when it comes to like trying to do stuff. It can sometimes be a challenge just because of the bureaucracy there, but it's like slowly hitting it and just doing like getting wins on the board. In terms of like how you, and the partnership made sense first off, because I'm from Minnesota. I was already a diehard Vikings fan. There's so much overlap between like sports and music. And I didn't think people had taken advantage of that really, especially on the team level. And they bought into it and they let me kind of experiment. And I'd do little things that I knew I could get wins on the board that would lead to bigger opportunities later on. For example, like we brought, here's a perfect example, right? We brought T-Pain out to perform pregame during the NFC playoffs, the game that Stephon Diggs had this miracle catch, the Minneapolis Miracle. And the stadium was just so electric. This season for opening game last week or a couple of weeks ago against, when we played Green Bay, we brought T-Pain in again, but this time he's doing the halftime show. He has a suite and it's just starting to see like, all right, that worked so well pregame. Now here's how we take it bigger and do it at a halftime show, which, artists like him and like, especially like hip hop and stuff isn't like typical halftime show now. Now you're starting to see it with Super Bowl and stuff. But if you go back a few years ago, that was never happening or welcoming in football. And it just came by like seeing that was an obvious niche and kind of proving it and slowly grinding it out. And now here we are years later doing those things.
Yeah. So you got to find those unique moments, those unique elements that nobody else is really doing, but finding those connections to, like you said, there's like a ton of connections between music and sports. So, you got to find with your event, what's that connection with maybe like another industry or another form of content that really just makes sense for you.
Totally. You nailed it. And that's really what it is. And I think like when you're looking at successful collaboration, then you really have to do the work. Like people think once they've got the pitch that they're done, right? Like, no, that's where the work starts. You have to execute because the work, like it's far more, and we go through this on the business side daily. Like client retention is far more important than bringing in new clients, because you guys, like we talked about the steps of how it takes through getting through 100 people to get that one client and how much work it takes to get them. Once you get them, you don't want to lose them. It's much easier to do the work to retain them and to keep them coming back versus like if you just do something that's subpar, that doesn't make them look like rock stars, you don't execute to the highest level, then they're likely going to like move on and you have to start all over again. And that process is much harder. So like focus on retaining your current clients. That's key. Once you get them in, like go above and beyond, do more than what you promised, make them come back and keep them abreast along the way. Like it's important to communicate and talk and see what they like, see what they don't like, be transparent about challenges and how you've overcome them. Nothing's ever going to go right, nor do they expect it to. So like if something goes wrong, like address it right away, don't push it off, be head on and find out how you solve it. Come with solutions. Don't, when you present problems.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. It's so much harder to find a new customer or a new client than it is to keep that current customer. So I appreciate that. And I got one last question for you, and it's a quick one, because a defining aspect of your career to date has been your ability to identify trends early. So I'm really curious to hear from you, what trends are you seeing in the live event space right now?
I mean, I think there's so much going. I think we're in the golden era of this, especially coming out after COVID. We've realized how important it is to get together, physically with people and see people. And I think like we're of the era where people don't want to just go like it used to be. Like your options were like to go to the movies, to go to baseball. They're like a lot of those things are out. It's like, how do you get innovative and do things? And that's where like seeing things like, one of the Eventbrite winners was the Wu-Tang Clan dinner, right? The 36 course meal, which is like genius, right? Like it's combining all of these worlds. I think we're seeing like so much crossover, and we've talked about this a lot, between brands and collaborations in the real world. Like I'm a huge fan of like those collaborations, but I think just thinking outside of the box, like people want to have fun. They're always looking for something new. They're looking for a way to entertain and pass the time that's not typical, that they can't get with others. And the great thing about all of you guys out there is you have the flexibility and the opportunity to actually go out and try something new and follow these new formulas, because you're not bound by these legacy models.
Right. I think that's so important. That's awesome. That like, yeah, you might be just starting off, but you have such an opportunity to do something that's really unique, and you're not bogged down by a larger corporation. You have the freedom to do exactly what you want to do.
And you can experiment and try anything. You're not like, hey, we're this venue, we have to do this, we can only do this. Like, no, you're like, you can try anything. And if it doesn't work, like learn from those mistakes and evolve and try something else. Don't get discouraged, just keep pushing.
Yeah, I love that. Skee, thank you so much for speaking with us today and for sharing your experience as a collaborator. We'll see you later, y'all.
Thank you, guys.